What if the fire that consumed your neighborhood store wasn't started by thugs, but by the very officers sworn to protect it? In the heart of Kenya, that's exactly what happened. Flames curled through broken glass. Smoke drifted over boxes of rice beans, oil not stolen but scorched. The Maguna supermarket, a symbol of resilience for the Kikuyu community, didn't fall to looters or angry mobs. It burned while uniformed police officers stood outside, not to defend, but to destroy. The footage doesn't lie. In video now viewed over 1 million times across TikTok and Telegram, we see them Kenyan police in full riot gear hurling stones at reinforced supermarket windows. Behind those windows, a small fire flickered contained, until they shattered the barrier and let the inferno in. Why, that question now haunts families from Nairobi to Nanyuki, from Mombasa to Minnesota. Why would police destroy the very thing they're paid to protect? This isn't just about one building. This is about betrayal. It's about a system where power is no longer a shield, but a weapon turned against the people. And if you're watching this from Georgia, Ghana, or Germany, ask yourself, what happens when truth is more dangerous than fire, when laughter disappears, when no one in uniform answers for destruction caught on camera? Because this story isn't over. The flames have died down, but the questions have not. Subscribe if you believe silence protects the guilty. Comment, Africa Rise, if you believe the people deserve answers, and share this story because justice only survives when memory refuses to fade. The morning began like any other in Kiamu. A quiet Thursday, market stalls opening, children heading to school, shopkeepers rolling up metal shutters ready for a long day's work. But by mid-afternoon, that ordinary rhythm was shattered. Smoke. Not just the faint haze from a cooking fire or trash burning down the road. This was thick black smoke curling above rooftops like a warning. Phones started ringing. Mothers left their cooking pots. Fathers rushed out of barbershops. "It's Magunas," someone whispered. Then someone shouted, "It Magunas is burning." For many in the Kikuyu community, Maguna supermarket wasn't just a store, it was a landmark, a family-run chain, a place where generations had shopped rice flour sugar school books. It stood for local pride, for resilience, for the idea that a community could build and sustain something of its own. Now it was engulfed in fire. But it wasn't the fire alone that stunned the country, it was how it started. Multiple videos surfaced within hours, shaky hands holding phones. From balconies, side streets, even rooftops, the footage showed what no one wanted to believe. Police officers, clearly visible in full uniform helmets glinting in the sun, standing at the perimeter of Magunas. Then, with practiced rhythm, they began hurling stones, not at crowds, not at attackers, but directly at the supermarket's reinforced windows. These weren't warning shots or accidental strikes. They were aimed, calculated. One officer stepped forward, shouted something. The audio is grainy, but one word rings out clearly: "Break it." And then the glass gave way. Until that moment, the fire outside had been manageable, contained, flickering just beyond the walls as if held at bay by design. But once those windows shattered, oxygen rushed in and the flames followed. Within minutes, the entire front of the building was aflame. Inventory, registers, storage, all gone. Witnesses say it was too coordinated to be chaos. One woman, a Boda Boda rider's wife, said through tears, "They didn't try to stop it. They helped it happen. Why would they do this?" Some officials claimed confusion, miscommunication. Officers mistook the scene for a riot. But the videos suggest otherwise. These men weren't rushed. They weren't under threat. There was no crowd pressing in. It wasn't a clash. It was an action. And the silence that followed spoke louder than the flames. No official statement, no arrests, no reprimands. Not one officer in the video has been named, suspended, or investigated. The Ministry of Interior called it an unfortunate incident. The president mentioned isolated tensions, but isolated from what? Because just days earlier similar scenes were reported in Kisumu and Nuru. Fires, windows smashed, police presence but not to prevent, to permit. In each case, local businesses many Kikuyu owned were the target. This isn't just about fire, it's about what fire reveals. It revealed a fracture, not between citizens and criminals, but between the people and those paid to protect them. Between law and lawlessness. Between the truth we see and the truth we're told. For the people of Kiamu, the fire at Magunas wasn't the first betrayal, but it was perhaps the most visible, caught on tape, spread online. A digital scar etched into public memory. And yet no answers. A pastor in nearby Eldoret told his congregation that Sunday, when the people with guns and uniforms become the ones who throw stones, we are no longer citizens. We are suspects. He wasn't talking about protesters, he was talking about the state. As the ashes of Magunas still smoldered, something colder began to spread, a silence. Not the respectful silence of mourning. No, this was heavier. The kind of silence that smothers, that hides something, that warns you not to ask. Just 3 days after the fire, Kenya awoke to another shock, the death of Zachary Kuki. He wasn't a politician, he wasn't a businessman, he was a comedian, a brilliant one. A man whose voice had traveled from market stalls to diaspora radio stations, from TikTok clips to crowded matatus, known for his impersonations of Deputy President Zachary Kuki, had become a voice of the people laughing at power when it felt too dangerous to speak. And now he was gone. No cause of death, no hospital statement, no family explanation, just gone. His funeral was private, too private. No state recognition, no flags lowered, no tribute from the Ministry of Culture, just whispers. Was it illness, a stroke, or was it something else? Because in Kenya, as many know, truth-tellers rarely leave quietly. Kuki wasn't the first. In 2021, King Wangi, a satirical TV host, was detained after mocking the president. He was never formally charged, just released into obscurity. His career vanished. His voice fell silent. And now Kuki joins that list. Except this time the country noticed. Online fellow comedians began posting cryptic messages. A popular YouTuber wrote simply, "When laughter dies, we all lose breath." Others warned their followers to back up your files, say less, stay safe. It didn't feel like grief. It felt like fear. And while Kuki was laid to rest in the red soil of Murang'a, another list was growing, a list of the detained. In central Kenya alone, more than 73 youth under 18 were arrested in the week after the Maguna fire. The charges: terror-related activity. Many had no prior offenses. Some were grabbed walking home from school. Most were from Kikuyu families. Almost none had access to legal counsel. Court records, when they existed, were sealed. Trials postponed indefinitely. Among the few names made public, one stood out: a boy known only as Muriuki, age 15. His crime being in the vicinity of the supermarket when it burned. But while teenagers were being marched into courtrooms, one name quietly slipped out of the system: Cairo. A former gang leader with a known record of extortion, Cairo had been arrested multiple times over the last 2 decades, most recently for involvement in illegal land seizures. His case at the Makadara court was quietly withdrawn. No coverage, no explanation. Just gone. How does a man with a violent history disappear from justice while children face charges meant for terrorists? The disparity wasn't just legal, it was ethnic, it was targeted. And then came the speech. At a rally in Meru, Deputy President Gachagua stood before a restless crowd and dropped a political bombshell. These gangs, he said, they were escorted by the police. It wasn't vague, it wasn't rhetorical. He pointed a finger at the very security forces under his government's command, and Kenyans felt the tremor. Gachagua's words, broadcast across radio and WhatsApp groups from Ghana to the UK, didn't just expose a scandal. They broke an unspoken rule: don't call out the uniform. But he did. And suddenly it all began to make sense: the broken glass, the hands that held the stones, the silence after Kuki's death, the young boys in handcuffs. It wasn't chaos, it was choreography. What if Gachagua seemed to ask this wasn't mismanagement? What if it was messaging from Nairobi's newsrooms to Minnesota's Kenyan churches? The reaction was swift and divided. Some hailed Gachagua as a whistleblower. Others accused him of playing tribal politics. But few denied the weight of what he had said. Because it wasn't just one fire, one funeral, or one flawed trial. It was a pattern, and it was growing. The fire at Magunas may have burned for hours, but what came after burned far longer, in hearts, in headlines, in homes. The first blow came quietly: a shift in narrative. Within 24 hours, mainstream headlines across Kenya locked into a single script: protesters torch supermarket, youth unrest turns violent businesses looted by mobs. Morning anchors repeated it. Talk radio debated it. By noon, the story had solidified: angry youth, chaotic scenes, government in control. And yet something didn't sit right, because thousands had already seen the videos. They had watched the officers throw the first stones. They knew the crowd hadn't stormed the supermarket. The fire didn't start inside. It had been let in, deliberately. But the official story had no room for that footage. One national news channel, K24, aired a few seconds of crowd activity, but cropped out the part showing police. Another citizen TV avoided the story altogether. The Daily Nation printed a front-page photo of smoke over the supermarket captioned, simply, "Riots erupt amid tensions." No corrections, no investigations, no interviews with eyewitnesses. For many Kenyans, it felt like more than just bias. It felt like collusion. And this wasn't the first time. Back in 2021, protests in Kisumu turned deadly after police opened fire on demonstrators. Independent footage confirmed it, but local media chose a safer line: clashes between protesters and police. Violence wasn't framed as state aggression, but as unavoidable chaos. So when the same thing happened at Magunas, it wasn't surprising, but it was devastating. Because this time, the victims weren't nameless. They were neighbors, friends, sons, daughters, and suddenly the community under attack became the one blamed for the fire they didn't start. The Kikuyu community, already wounded by the blaze and by the arrests that followed, now faced a second assault, this time in public perception. "They're stirring trouble," said one regional minister during a press conference in Embu. "They want to destabilize the government." That rhetoric spread fast. Social media feeds filled with angry posts, talk shows fanned the flames. And no one paused to ask, why would a community burn down its own businesses? The Kikuyu, one of Kenya's largest ethnic groups, have long been active in politics and resilient in economics. But they have also been targets during the post-election violence of 2007, during political disputes in 2013, and now once again in 2025. The pattern is haunting. Crisis, blame, isolation. One elder in Nakuru said softly, "We are not the cause, we are the target." And when your own government views you with suspicion, everything changes. Service becomes surveillance. Justice becomes judgment. Safety becomes conditional. Across towns like Nyeri, Kirinyaga, and Muranga, community murals once painted to honor unity have been defaced. Shops known for hiring across ethnic lines have been vandalized. And whispers of lists, unofficial records of Kikuyu-run properties began circulating through Telegram and WhatsApp. These aren't rumors anymore. They're signals, warnings. And they're creating a climate of permanent suspicion. Yet amid the darkness, glimmers of resistance still flicker. In Eldoret, a group of young Luo men showed up to help rebuild a Kikuyu-owned bookstore. In Kisi Church, leaders from multiple ethnic groups held a shared prayer vigil calling for truth and unity. And in Mombasa, an old Swahili fisherman named Harith told a local reporter, "If their house burns, ours will catch flame too." That perhaps is the deeper fear. Because this isn't just about one ethnic group, one party, one fire. It's about the fragile idea of Kenya itself as a nation of many united not by tribe or title, but by shared hope. And now that hope feels under siege. From the schools where children whisper their last names carefully, to the markets where shopkeepers lower their voices, to the churches where prayer now includes a plea for protection. This fire lit at Magunas now smolders across the republic. Across oceans, the images flickered. A supermarket engulfed in flames, police officers with stones in hand, a comedian silenced without a sound, teenagers labeled terrorists, and a nation split between what's seen and what's said. But outside Kenya's borders, something strange happened. The world barely blinked. Mainstream international media, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, carried brief mentions. A headline here, a scroll at the bottom of a segment. Most simply repeated the Kenyan government's official line: unrest in central Kenya. Youth suspected of violence. Very few showed the viral footage. None questioned the government's narrative. And in an age where smartphones capture what reporters won't, the silence felt louder than ever. Yet across the diaspora in New Jersey, Minnesota, Toronto, London, Kenyans abroad felt the story in their bones. They knew this wasn't just about one fire. It was about a dangerous drift away from accountability, away from transparency, and toward authoritarian tactics dressed in law and order. Kenyan pastors in Atlanta organized virtual prayer vigils. In Birmingham, a Kenyan youth group held a digital protest flooding Twitter and TikTok with the hashtag Ross Kenya Burning. And in Baltimore, an elderly woman named Mama Njoki, who lived through Kenya's independence struggle, said through tears on a live stream, "This is not the Kenya we fought for." But the global reaction wasn't just Kenyan. Many African Americans saw something familiar. Because what happened at Magunas didn't just resemble injustice, it echoed history. In the 1960s, American South black-owned businesses were often burned not by mobs, but by police or their accomplices. Reports were ignored, victims blamed. Local newsrooms edited the footage. Sound familiar? The parallel wasn't lost on activists. One professor from Howard University posted a side-by-side video, police attacking peaceful black civil rights marchers in Selma and Kenyan officers smashing the glass at Magunas. The caption read, "Different continent, same script. State violence hides behind the uniform. This resonance matters." Because when African nations begin turning on their own and the world shrugs, it sends a dangerous message, not just to Kenya, but to the entire continent. In Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré has faced immense pressure for attempting to break from the old post-colonial structures. His government has focused on community empowerment, youth-led security reforms, and a call for African sovereignty, and in doing so, has drawn the ire of Western interests. Some have praised Traoré for promoting a new model of leadership transparent, indigenous, and defiant of foreign manipulation. Others have warned that such boldness puts him at risk not just from external powers, but from within. And now Kenya offers a cautionary tale. What happens when a government begins to fear its own people more than foreign influence? What happens when voices like Zachary Kuki's playful, truthful, beloved are extinguished without investigation? What happens when the fire isn't just physical, but institutional? In Washington, a small group of U.S. lawmakers has taken notice. One African Affairs Subcommittee staffer leaked a memo stating concern over growing evidence of targeted ethnic profiling and police collusion in Kenya. But no formal hearing has been called, no sanctions discussed. It's not that the West doesn't know, it's that the truth isn't convenient. And so the burden shifts to citizens, to the diaspora, to you. If history teaches anything from Alabama to Eldoret, it's that injustice left unchallenged becomes policy. That silence isn't neutral, it sides with power. That if we don't ask who threw the first stone, we'll soon forget who built the house. Because while the flames may have been local, the warning is global. They say truth is the first casualty of war, but in Kenya today, truth wasn't shot. It was ignored, silenced, burned. From the smoke of Maguna's supermarket to the quiet grave of Zachary Kuki, a single question still echoes through every street, every living room, every place where fear now walks louder than faith. Who gave the order? Because fires don't start themselves. Windows don't shatter on command. Teenagers don't become terrorists overnight. Comedians don't vanish without cause. And entire communities, proud, peaceful, generationally rooted, don't just wake up and torch their own future. Someone wanted this. Someone decided that fear was easier than fairness. That suspicion was more useful than solidarity. And if no one answers that question now, what else can be burned next? The flames may have consumed one building. But what about trust? What about unity? What about the fragile social contract that holds a nation together? Let's be clear, this is not just a Kenyan tragedy, it is a blueprint. Because when state power turns its gaze inward, when those in uniform act without consequence, when the press edits instead of investigates, and when communities are divided by whispers instead of united by truth, the fire spreads. And it doesn't stop at one border. In Uganda, similar tactics have been reported. In Nigeria, protest footage disappears before it's aired. In Zimbabwe, comedians are censored before they reach a microphone. From Lusaka to Luanda, Africa is watching. And many are wondering, is this what post-colonial freedom was supposed to look like? It's no coincidence that some leaders like Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso have begun calling for something different. A new model, a continent led by its own memory, its own heroes, its own definitions of dignity and justice. But those voices too are being tested by outside pressure, by internal sabotage, by silence. So we ask again and we ask you, when the fire comes for memory, who remembers? When the stone is thrown by the man in uniform who protects the people from the protector? When laughter is silenced, when justice hides, and when the world looks away, what will you do? Because this isn't a documentary. This isn't a story in someone else's backyard. This is a message. To every American who remembers Selma, to every African who remembers colonialism, to every elder who remembers what silence cost the last time, to every child who deserves to laugh without fear, to every voice that still dares to speak. The time to whisper has passed. If you believe that Zachary Kuki deserved answers, not silence, say his name in the comments. If you believe the fire at Magunas was not just destruction, but a message type, we see you. If you believe Africa deserves truth, unity, and fearless leadership, comment Africa Rise. And if you're still here watching, remembering, questioning, we thank you. Subscribe if you believe that justice must never be buried beneath the ashes. Share this if you believe someone else deserves to know what really happened. Because silence doesn't just protect the guilty, it prepares the next fire.